Matthew Perry didn't just die from addiction in 2023. He'd already nearly died from it 5 years earlier in 2018, when his opioid abuse caused his gastrointestinal system to perforate, putting him in a 2-week coma with a 5% chance of survival and requiring 14 surgeries, including months with a colostomy bag. A nightmare experience that should have been his final warning to get sober permanently, but instead became just another chapter in a 30-year cycle of addiction. Brief recovery, relapse, and ultimately death. June 2018. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Los Angeles, California. ICU. Matthew Perry was dying, hooked to machines, tubes everywhere, unconscious, in a medically induced coma. His family had been called, his friends, co-stars notified. Everyone told the same thing: if you want to say goodbye, come now. He probably won't survive. This video reveals what actually happened in 2018, when Matthew's opioid addiction caused his colon to burst and nearly killed him. Why doctors gave him only a 5% chance of survival after his gastrointestinal system shut down from years of drug abuse. How Matthew spent 2 weeks in a coma while his body fought sepsis and organ failure. What the 14 emergency surgeries involved, and why he had to live with a colostomy bag for 9 months while his intestines healed. How Matthew described the experience as the closest I've ever come to dying and credited surviving as a miracle that would change his life forever. Why he stayed sober for several years after 2018 and even wrote a memoir in 2022 about beating addiction called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, and how despite surviving the 2018 near-death experience that should have been his final warning, Matthew relapsed to ketamine in 2023 and died on October 28 at age 54, proving that surviving rock bottom once doesn't guarantee you'll survive it the next time. The monitor beeped. Steady. Mechanical. The only sound proving Matthew Perry was still alive. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, June 2018. Intensive care unit. Matthew was unconscious, had been for days. Medically induced coma, too critical to wake up. His body couldn't handle consciousness right now. The doctors stood outside his room, reviewing charts, discussing options, none of them good. Dr. Morrison, the lead surgeon, shook his head. I've done everything I can. The perforation was extensive. We've repaired what we could, but his body is shutting down. Sepsis, organ failure. If he makes it through the next 48 hours, I'd be shocked. Another doctor asked, survival odds? 5%. Maybe 5%. That's what they told Matthew's family when they arrived. 5% chance he'd live through this. His mother sat by his bedside, crying, praying, holding his hand. Please don't leave me. Please fight. But Matthew couldn't fight. His body was too damaged, too broken. Years of abuse had finally caught up with him. And now at 48 years old, Matthew Perry was dying. How did it get this bad? Matthew's addiction started decades earlier, during Friends. Peak fame, America's favorite sitcom. Matthew playing Chandler Bing, the funny guy everyone loved. But Matthew was secretly taking Vicodin. Lots of it. Started with a prescription after a minor injury, then couldn't stop. By season 3 of Friends, 1997, Matthew was taking 55 pills a day. 55. Mixing alcohol with painkillers, showing up to set high, weight fluctuating wildly, visible on screen if you know what to look for. The cast knew, producers knew. They tried interventions, rehab, support. Matthew would get clean for a few months, then relapse. 2000s, escalation. Vicodin wasn't enough. Matthew moved to stronger opioids, OxyContin, Dilaudid, whatever he could get. Multiple stints in rehab. 201. 2005, 2011, 2013. Each time, Matthew would get sober. Stay clean for months, sometimes a year. Then something would trigger him. Stress, loneliness, depression, and he'd relapse. By 2018, Matthew had been actively using opioids again for several years. High doses, daily. His body was saturated. He knew it was dangerous, knew he was killing himself. But addiction doesn't care about knowledge, doesn't care about logic. It just demands more. Spring 2018, Matthew was using heavily, not publicly. He'd gotten good at hiding it. Living alone in his Los Angeles mansion. No spouse, no kids, no one monitoring him daily. Friends would visit occasionally. Notice he seemed off. Tired, distracted, weight loss. But Matthew would make excuses. I'm fine, just stressed. He wasn't fine. The opioids were destroying his gastrointestinal system. Years of abuse had damaged his stomach lining, his intestines, his colon. Opioids slow down the digestive system. That's a known side effect. Constipation is common. But at the doses Matthew was taking for years, the damage was catastrophic. His colon was barely functioning, backed up, inflamed. The tissue was dying. May 2018, Matthew started experiencing severe abdominal pain, cramping, bloating, couldn't eat, couldn't use the bathroom normally. He ignored it, took more pills to manage the pain, which made everything worse. June 2018, the pain became unbearable. Matthew couldn't stand up straight, couldn't think, knew something was very wrong. He called his assistant. "I need to go to the hospital now." Cedars-Sinai emergency room, June 28. Matthew arrived in agony, doubled over, pale, sweating, barely coherent. The ER doctors ran tests, CT scan, blood work, imaging. The results were catastrophic: gastrointestinal perforation. Matthew's colon had burst, a hole in his intestinal wall. Contents of his digestive system were leaking into his abdominal cavity. This is a medical emergency, life-threatening. Without immediate surgery, the infection would spread, sepsis would set in, organs would fail, death would follow within hours. Dr. Morrison was called in. He reviewed the scans. "We need to operate immediately. This is bad, very bad." Matthew was barely conscious, signed consent forms, was rushed into emergency surgery. The first surgery, exploratory, open up the abdomen, assess the damage, repair the perforation. Dr. Morrison opened Matthew up, found devastation. The perforation was extensive, not a small hole, a large rupture. Years of opioid abuse had weakened the tissue so severely that the colon wall had essentially disintegrated. Fecal matter had leaked into the abdominal cavity. Infection was already spreading. Matthew's body was going into septic shock. Dr. Morrison and his team worked for hours, cleaned out the infection, removed dead tissue, repaired what they could. But the damage was too severe for a single surgery. Matthew's digestive system couldn't be reconnected immediately. Too much inflammation, too much trauma. Dr. Morrison made the decision: colostomy. He brought a section of Matthew's colon through the abdominal wall, created an opening, a stoma on Matthew's stomach, attached a colostomy bag. This would allow Matthew's intestines to heal without being used. Waste would bypass the damaged area and collect in the external bag. It was temporary, hopefully. If Matthew survived long enough for his body to heal, they could reverse it later. First surgery, 6 hours, complete. Matthew was moved to ICU, put into a medically induced coma, too unstable to wake up. The next 2 weeks, hell. Matthew's body was fighting sepsis, massive infection from the intestinal perforation. His organs were shutting down, kidneys failing, needed dialysis, liver struggling, toxins building up, heart weak, irregular rhythm, lungs fluid accumulating, pneumonia developing. Every system was compromised. Matthew's body was trying to die. The doctors did everything they could: antibiotics, IV fluids, dialysis, ventilator, blood transfusions. But Matthew wasn't responding well. Each day brought new complications, new crises. His family stayed by his bedside. His mother, his father, his stepfather, Keith Morrison, the Dateline NBC correspondent, all of them terrified. The Friends cast was notified: Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, David Schwimmer. They'd been through Matthew's addiction struggles with him for 20 years. But this was different. This might be the end. Some visited, sat with him, talked to him even though he couldn't hear. "Come on, Matthew, fight. You've survived before. You can do this." But the doctors were less optimistic. Day 5, Dr. Morrison pulled the family aside. "His organs are failing. We're doing everything we can. But I need you to prepare yourselves. The odds are not good." Day 7, another emergency surgery, internal bleeding. Matthew's body wasn't clotting properly. They had to go back in, stop the bleeding, repair new damage. Surgery number 2, another 5 hours. Day 10, pneumonia worsening, ventilator settings maxed out. Matthew's lungs couldn't process oxygen efficiently. Day 12, kidney function still critically low. Dialysis not improving things. The medical team had done everything, given Matthew every possible intervention, thrown every resource at keeping him alive. Now it was up to Matthew's body. Would it fight, or would it give up? Day 14, something changed. Matthew's vital signs stabilized, just slightly, but enough to notice. Kidney function improving, tiny bit, but measurable. Infection markers dropping. The antibiotics were finally working. Lung function, better. Oxygen levels rising. Dr. Morrison was cautiously optimistic. "He's turning a corner, maybe. We'll see if it holds." Day 15, continued improvement. Day 16, stable enough to consider waking him up. Day 17, they reduced the sedation, let Matthew start regaining consciousness. Slowly, carefully, watching for any signs of distress. Matthew's eyes opened, confused, disoriented, tubes everywhere, pain, fear. A nurse held his hand. Matthew, you're in the hospital. You've been very sick, but you're going to be okay. Just breathe. We've got you. Matthew couldn't talk. Ventilator tube down his throat. But his eyes showed terror, confusion. What happened? Why am I here? Over the next few days, they weaned him off the ventilator, removed the breathing tube, let him breathe on his own. His first words, "How long have I been here?" 2.5 weeks. Matthew's face, shock. He'd lost 2 weeks, didn't remember any of it. The doctors explained. The perforation, the sepsis, the organ failure, the surgeries. You almost died, Matthew. Your survival is honestly miraculous. I've never seen someone come back from this. Matthew looked down at his body, noticed the colostomy bag attached to his abdomen. What is that? The doctors explained. Temporary, to let his intestines heal. He'd need to keep it for several months. Then they'd do another surgery to reverse it. Matthew started crying. This was real. This had really happened. He'd almost died, and it was his fault. Years of opioid abuse, years of destroying his body. This was the consequence. The next few months, recovery. Brutal recovery. Matthew was in the hospital for several more weeks. Physical therapy, learning to walk again, learning to manage the colostomy bag. The bag was humiliating, degrading, attached to his stomach, collecting waste, having to empty it, clean it, deal with leaks, smell, discomfort. Matthew later said, the colostomy bag was the most humiliating experience of my life. I'm a celebrity, I'm supposed to be glamorous, and I'm emptying shit into a plastic bag attached to my stomach. But it was also sobering, a constant physical reminder of what addiction had done to him. July 2018, Matthew was discharged from the hospital. Went home, still weak, still healing, still with the colostomy bag. His doctors were clear. You cannot use opioids anymore ever. Your body can't handle it. If you relapse, you will die. Not might, will. Matthew heard them. For the first time in years, he really heard the warning. He'd almost died. 5% survival chance. 14 surgeries. 2 weeks in a coma. Months with a colostomy bag. This was his rock bottom. Had to be. Nothing could be worse than this. Matthew made a decision. Get sober. For real. Permanently. No more relapses. 2018-2021. Matthew stayed sober. 3 years. The longest stretch of sobriety in his adult life. He threw himself into recovery. Therapy, support groups, built a sober network, focused on health. The colostomy was reversed in early 2019 after 9 months. Another surgery, reconnecting his intestines. Painful, but successful. Matthew's body slowly healed. He gained weight, looked healthier, seemed genuinely happy. His friends noticed the change. This time feels different. He seems serious about staying clean. Matthew talked openly about his near-death experience. I was given a second chance. I'm not wasting it. He started planning a memoir. Wanted to write about his addiction journey, help other people, show them recovery was possible. 2021, Matthew started writing, pouring his experiences onto the page. The addiction, the relapses, the 2018 near-death, the colostomy, the shame, the hope. The book would be called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. The terrible thing was addiction. The monster that had controlled his life for 30 years. Matthew wrote brutally honest chapters. No sugarcoating. No celebrity gloss. Just the ugly truth of addiction. He described taking 55 pills a day during Friends, drinking vodka from water bottles on set, spending millions on drugs, the interventions, the relapses, and 2018, the hospital, the coma, the 5% survival chance, the colostomy bag, the humiliation. I almost died. I should have died. Surviving that was my wake-up call. I'm sober now, I'm grateful. I'm done with that life. The memoir was scheduled for publication, November 2022. Matthew seemed genuinely excited. This book will help people, show them they can survive this. I'm proof. But addiction doesn't care about memoirs, doesn't care about hope, doesn't care about second chances. 2022, something shifted. Matthew finished the book, did press tours, interviews, talked about recovery, seemed stable. But privately, he was struggling. Depression, anxiety, loneliness. Matthew was 53, single, no spouse, no children, living alone in a mansion. His friends' co-stars had families, lives. He'd see them occasionally, but they'd all moved on. Matthew felt isolated. Despite fame, despite wealth, despite surviving 28, he felt empty. Late 2022, Matthew started therapy again, trying to manage the depression, trying to stay sober. His therapist suggested ketamine therapy, legal, medical, for treatment-resistant depression. Ketamine had shown promise in clinical trials. Low doses, supervised, could help with severe depression. Matthew agreed, started ketamine infusion therapy, doctor-supervised, legal doses, and it helped, at first. The depression lifted slightly. Matthew felt better, more hopeful. But then the pattern. Matthew wanted more. The therapeutic doses weren't enough. He wanted the full experience, the dissociation, the escape. By early 2023, Matthew was using ketamine recreationally, beyond therapeutic doses, getting it from sources outside his doctor. His assistant Kenneth noticed. "Are you okay? You seem off?" "I'm fine, just managing my depression." But Matthew wasn't fine. He was relapsing. Different drug, same addiction. Spring 2023, Matthew's ketamine use escalated. He was no longer going to the supervised clinic. He was buying it illegally. Doctors who'd sell to him, dealers who'd supply him. The same pattern as before. Legitimate medical needs spiraling into abuse. Denial, isolation, dependence. By summer 2023, Matthew was using ketamine multiple times daily. Kenneth was administering injections. Matthew was spiraling. Friends noticed. "Matthew seems out of it again. Is he using?" But Matthew hid it, denied it, made excuses. The memoir had been out for months. Matthew had spent 2022 promoting recovery, telling people he was sober, that he'd beaten addiction. Now, less than a year later, he was using again. The cycle had repeated. Again, October 2023. Matthew was using heavily. Ketamine injections 6 to 8 times daily. The network around him, Kenneth assistant administering injections. Dr. Placencia, selling ketamine at massive markup. Jasveen Sangha, ketamine queen supplying bulk. Everyone enabling, no one stopping him. October 28, 2023. Matthew's last day. 3 injections, 8:30 a.m., 12:45 p.m., 1:30 p.m., shoot me up with a big one. Matthew got in the hot tub, lost consciousness, drowned. Dead at 54. The news broke. Matthew Perry found dead at his Los Angeles home. Shock, grief, confusion. Initial reports, apparent drowning. But people who knew him suspected. The pattern, the history, addiction. December 2023, autopsy results released. Cause of death, acute effects of ketamine. Matthew's blood ketamine levels, equivalent to general anesthesia. He'd overdosed. The ketamine had stopped his heart and lungs. He'd lost consciousness in the hot tub, drowned. It was 2018 all over again. Except this time, there was no hospital, no emergency surgery, no 5% chance, just death. The people who'd known Matthew for decades were devastated. His friends, co-stars, his family, his sober friends. They'd watched him almost die in 2018, watched him miraculously survive, watched him get sober, write a memoir, inspire people, and now he was dead. From addiction, the thing he'd sworn he'd beaten. His mother gave a statement. Matthew fought his addiction for 30 years. He had periods of sobriety, moments of hope, but ultimately the disease won. We're heartbroken. The 2018 near-death should have been the warning that saved him. 5% survival chance, 14 surgeries, colostomy bag, humiliation, pain, that should have been enough. Should have been the rock bottom that stuck. Matthew even said so. In his memoir, "I almost died in 2018. That was my wake-up call. I'll never go back to that life." But 5 years later, relapse, death. The pattern completed. Because surviving rock bottom once doesn't mean you'll survive it the next time. Because addiction doesn't care about second chances. Because the brain of an addict doesn't learn from near-death experiences the way logic suggests it should. June 2018. Hospital bed. Matthew Perry in a coma. 5% survival chance. Doctors saying if he survives this, it'll be a miracle. Matthew survived. Against the odds. 14 surgeries. 9 months with a colostomy bag. 3 years sober. 2022. Memoir published. I beat addiction. I'm proof recovery is possible. 2023. Ketamine relapse. Same pattern, different drug. October 28, 2023. Dead in a hot tub. Ketamine overdose. Age 54. The 2018 warning saved him temporarily. 5 years of life. 3 years sober. 1 memoir. Hope. But addiction was patient. Waiting. Always there. 2018 should have been the final warning. But addiction doesn't do final warnings. It just waits and waits. And when you let your guard down, It kills you anyway. Matthew Perry survived 28, but he didn't survive 2023. The disease always wins eventually, unless you fight it every single day, for the rest of your life. Matthew fought for 30 years, won many battles, lost the war. The 2018 near-death was a warning, a gift, 5 more years of life. But warnings don't cure addiction. They just delay the inevitable, unless the person chooses every single day to stay sober. Matthew chose sobriety for 3 years, then chose ketamine, and ketamine chose death. The hospital bed saved him in 2018. The hot tub killed him in 2023. Same man, same addiction, different ending. This time, there was no 5% chance, no miracle, no survival, just death.